Welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan, and the subject of this 10-minute moan is yet another top secret meeting that Humza Yousaf's had with an ambassador from another country. Now, this story has been highlighted by the Scottish Daily Express. The reporter David Walker has wrote quite an in-depth piece, and I will read most of it verbatim and give my opinion once I have finished. So the headline is Redacted. Humza Yousaf in new secrecy storm as a meeting with Jordanian ambassador kept top secret. Exclusive, the First Minister met with the Jordanian ambassador to the UK in Butte House in December, but details of the meeting have been kept under wraps by the secretive Scottish Government. Sounds familiar. Humza Yousaf has been caught up in another secrecy storm after the Scottish Government refused to release any details of what he spoke to the Jordanian ambassador about after they met for a cosy lunch at Butte House in December. The First Minister welcomed Manar Dabas to Edinburgh following a request from the foreign diplomat. Minutes were taken at the summit between the pair on December 18, but these were almost fully redacted after the Scottish Daily Express asked for them through a Freedom of Information legislation. One of the big issues that was almost certainly discussed would have been the war in Gaza due to Jordan being home to Palestine refugees from Israel. The Scottish Government has made a habit of refusing to reveal what Mr Yousaf is talking about with foreign diplomats, as officials claim it would damage the relationship between Scotland and other countries. It relies on Section 32 of the Freedom of Information rules to do so. Officials wrote, the Scottish Government cannot release the requested information in case of substantial prejudice to international relations. This exemption is subject to a public interest test. Therefore, taking account of all the circumstances of this case, we have considered if the public interest in disclosing the information outweighs the public interest in applying the exemption. We have found that on balance, the public interest lies in favour of upholding the exemption. We recognise that there is some public interest in this release because of the public interest will be interested in correspondence and discussions between Scottish Government and another government. However, this interest would be outweighed by the essential need and therefore public interest in ensuring that good diplomatic relations are maintained with another country by respecting the confidentiality with which discussions and correspondence were undertaken. Now, what that would suggest is that the Jordanian ambassador wanted to speak to the First Minister of Scotland about something that he wanted to remain secret because they believe that remaining it secret outweighs any interest the public would have, because they need to retain good diplomatic relations. Interesting, isn't it? The exemption has also been applied to some text held within the meeting note you requested. We have determined that the release of information could also risk damaging international relations and therefore found that when subjected to public interest test, the exemption should be upheld. Now, here is a bit that's interesting. Because they have already revealed, due to explaining their redaction reasons, that it could affect relationship with Jordan and Scotland, this next bit is particularly interesting. But the SNP executive did release emails surrounding the event which reveals that the Jordanian ambassador waited months in order to get an audience with the First Minister. At first he was offered time with Culture Minister Christina McKelvey after making a request in May. One must consider why he refused to meet Christina McKelvey and was insistent on meeting the First Minister for things and to discuss things that, if they were made public, could put at risk the relationship between Jordan and Scotland. Isn't it intriguing? However, this offer was turned down by the embassy, who once again asked to talk to Mr Yousaf about issues which were kept fully redacted. In the end, after discussions between special advisers and government officials, the SNP leader accepted an invitation to talk to Mr Dabas. I would love to know the reasoning why Mr Dabas wasn't happy speaking to Christina McKelvey. However, the pair did meet for lunch in Bute House on December 18, with the only available information about this was that they shared introductions and pleasantries before the First Minister invited his guests to raise the topics he was interested in discussing. Because the meeting was set up between Scottish Government and the Jordanian Embassy, there were no UK Government officials present. At the end of the summit, he invited Mr. DeBar to the government's lavish Burns Night reception in London. Isn't that intriguing? Now, what's actually quite similar is the redaction reasoning that the Daily Express was given. Because I too got a similar, but even more worrying redaction explanation with my recent FOI regarding the donation to UNRWA. And in that, my redaction note quite clearly stated that the information was withheld because it could affect the relationship between Westminster and Holyrood. Now, what we need to consider here is Scottish Government have got no rights for any foreign affairs. In fact, the First Minister has already been warned by the Westminster Government for his actions at the COP26 meetings last year and previous. It doesn't seem to have deterred him. We now have more evidence of him breaking the protocols for when he meets foreign ministers. And you would think under the current climate where there's a war in that region, you would wish to be as transparent as possible. You know, the transparency that we keep hearing from the SNP and indeed Humza Yousaf that they aim to provide. Yet here we have another great example of anything but transparency. And I think because of the seriousness of what could be discussed, I think others in Westminster should look at this closer. I don't think they would be given the same sort of response as anyone in the public requesting an FOI response. And I would severely hope that the UK government, in some capacity, have been looking into this and many other instances where Humza Yousaf seems to be getting above his station. Humza Yousaf has no right getting involved in any foreign affairs, particularly ones through my redacted FOI confirm that they could affect the relationship between Holyrood and Westminster, and now this redaction that quite clearly states it could affect the relationship by from the Jordanians. It is not Humza's place to jeopardise in any way relationships with any country out with the United Kingdom, because he has no right to do so. These powers are reserved, thankfully, for the United Kingdom government, where we have the big boy pants on and have centuries of dealing in such affairs, not 17 years of it, like this tremendously inept SNP government. So Mr. Humza Yousaf would be better advised to take a back seat and stop sticking his nose into things that he's not clever enough to deal with, nor able to deal with. So if you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already, get involved in the chat below, that's always enjoyable, but most importantly of all, unless you are Humza Yousaf or anybody else in the Scottish Government that think there's some sort of kiddie on world power, have a great day. Cheery bye now.